Standing up in McKinney. This is, according to Callus, episode 664. Coming to you on July the 1st, the year of our Lord 2024. It is the month of July, which should be, in theory, the most patriotic month of the year, especially after the last month we've all been through. All right, so we've got some format changes. We've got some other updates. Try and make sense of how we're going to do this going forward here. So before we get into that, let me just tell you that we're going to start with some municipal news, if you will, because it is a Monday. We're going to talk about a few things that have gone on the national level. We'll touch base on one or two things perhaps at the state level. And then there is a underlying question that we need to consider. Before we get there, let me remind you the best way you can help me overcome the algorithm, that you can help us get our voice out there to be heard, to continue to be the alternative media, if you will, is to like, share, and subscribe to this program. Follow me on the podcatcher of your choice. Join me on the social media of your preference. I have a page in the group over at Facebook. I'm a pro at Gab, and I still drop in at MeWe. And, you know, the list of changes gets longer and longer. But for now, that's what we're doing. And, if you will, YouTube still has all of my programming on the audio format. All right. So with that, here we go on with the program. Okay. So I announced last week, due to taking on some extra responsibilities, the only reasonable thing for me to do was to transition to 3 days a week worth of programming. It is my plan in my attempt to make each program or each show or each episode between 40 and 45 minutes long, giving it a little bit more time per episode, even though we're going to have less episodes. Now, that being said, as always, everything is subject to change. So, for those of you that know me in real life, you know that I'm quite active in local politics. I have a new gig. I'm one of the vice chairs of the Republican Party of Collin County, which means that I'm going to start picking up some slack and some duties courtesy of the new chairman, Mr. Shelby Williams. Give him an applause, if you will. The reason being is the role of county chairman cannot feasibly be done by a single person unless they do it full time. And nobody in their right mind wants to work for full time without getting paid. And seeing that this position does not pay, we have to look at ways that we can divvy up and spread load the responsibilities. Now, when you are essentially the leader of a large volunteer organization, that is a burden. It's not an easy task, and it's not for the thin-skinned or lighthearted. That being said, if it is divvied up well and responsibly, the load can be significantly lightened. I volunteered myself. Now, I got to say, apparently I never learned what the acronym for Navy is. Never again volunteer yourself, because I keep doing the same darn thing over and over and over again. But I believe that the future is dependent upon us doing a good job right here in Collin County. Now, I'm not going to go doom and gloom. I'm not going to go full-on cheerleader. I'm just going to say that I'm confident by the numbers that Collin County needs to deliver. And we need to deliver at least 250,000 votes to Senator Cruz and soon-to-be President Trump once again. The way we're going to deliver those 250,000 votes is going to require us to do some work, some out-of-the-box thinking, put in some effort. And by all means, that also means that we should consider quit shooting at each other, quit fighting with each other, quit disagreeing over minor issues. much like the hard right, right? Whatever you want to specify that is, the grassroots right, spends a lot of time fretting over the establishment right, the moderate right, or just the plain moderates, or just the plain establishment, if you will. There's what I would call a legitimate concern, and then there's too much concern, and I think we've gone past legitimate to too much. The flip side of that is, and I am afraid we're giving them good cause, that the moderates, the establishment, fears and dislikes the quote-unquote hard right. Now, I'm not a big fan. I don't think that's a fair explanation, but that's where we're at. And what does that mean? That means we need to put down the jabs at each other. And both sides are guilty. Now, and to be clear, most of the guys that I would classify as center-right or moderate, if you will, are not bad guys. The ladies, the guys, they're very nice. They agree with us on the vast majority of things. They're maybe just not as bold or aggressive as we might like. That doesn't mean they're our enemy. Unfortunately, when we keep treating them like an enemy, they have no other recourse but to see us as their enemy, which means that it dilutes us even further. It weakens us even more. You cannot get 250,000 voters to show up and support the Donald and Ted if you're going to be doing that. We have to put this aside. That requires that we focus on the big picture. That requires that we remember that we're on the same team. And I find it ironic that I'm the one that has to preach about unity. But here we are. Now, I also want to distinguish this because there are people that call themselves Republicans. They may even say they're good moderate Republicans, and they say that anybody disagrees with them, anybody's to the right of them, is a crazy right-wing nut job, whatever else. They use disparaging comments, or the hard right, or extreme right. Well, when you're center left and somebody's right of you, that does not make them hard right. But unfortunately, that's what we see. And if we continue to agree to those terms, right, agree to that framework, we're going to lose each and every time because it scares our friends, the moderates. It paints them into a corner because they're, quote, siding with us. So we have to be aggressive and we have to be pushing back on the left. We need to focus on the leftist progressive socialists, right? We have to frame everything in that phrase. That is a leftist argument. You're pushing for progressivism. That's a socialist mindset. We have to be willing to do that, but we need to be targeted on where we're going with that. We can't just dismiss everything. That 10% difference is, oh, they're just rhino socialists. Well, no. That's not the case. More often than not, it is not the case. So as we step into the charter season, right, the charter amendments that are going on in the city of McKinney, it should be stated that there are probably some good ideas that are going to come out of those work groups, right? We want to see positive things for the city. And I would think any city wants to improve. I also am fully aware that there is a group in every city, the Old Boys Network, right? The City Fathers, or whatever you want to call them. And I've talked about this again, time and time again. If they're working on what's best for the city, and if they're generally concerned about what improves the city, I don't sweat that. I don't worry about it. Now, that may mean that the city leadership is quote unquote moderate. It may mean that they cave into some things that I wouldn't, but they feel that's what's best for the city. Now, I'm not going to argue whether or not that's right or wrong. I'm just going to say that's the way it is, and I accept it. Now, the goal is how can we shift that window to the right, right? How can we, right? We want to make a difference where we're pulling people to the right. We want to salvage and improve our civilization, not continue to drift into oblivion. Well, the way you do that is you don't beat up and attack the people just to the left of you. You focus your ire at the ones that are far left, full left. And the ones that are center left, that are calling anybody to the center right, crazy nut jobs, those are the people you need to put in line. Those are the ones you need to remind that, no, they're actually the peaceful ones. They're the reasonable ones. We're less so. And when I say we, I just mean as that group. I'm not sure where I'd lump myself in there because I am a liberty advocate. I occasionally do agree with the left people. Occasionally. I got to say it's becoming more and more apparent to me that that's going to be more and more rare. But here we are. All right. So just again, when you're looking at the charter elections in the city of McKinney, you need to keep in mind what's at play, right? And look, everybody understands that the changing the term limits really only benefits one person, right? That's what it's really all about. But it's bigger than that. It's more important than that. And we shouldn't dwell on that. Whether or not you like the current mayor really should be irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And again, I say this again, if the guy wants to serve, all he's going to do is run for an at-large seat. I mean, if he's putting the city of McKinney first, if he's really concerned about what's best for the city and he wants to continue to serve, he can do that as an at-large member of the city council. He doesn't have to be the mayor anymore. And that's not an attack. It's just an obvious observation. There's at least 2, if not 3 other people that want to be the mayor. They've waited their turn. Let's see what's going on. All right, enough on the local here. Let's talk about something else that's slightly less local but directly related. So I received an email from a listener. And then I got a phone call telling me I got an email from a listener. Now, I don't know this guy, and I won't pretend to know him, but I'm sure I've run across him a time or two. In any case, his first name is Ron, and I'm not going to say anything more because I'm not sure he wants to admit it, and I haven't had an opportunity to verify the data he sent me. But setting all of that aside, there is an interesting claim in here, which really cannot be passed up. So apparently in the city of McKinney, in the city of Allen, or the McKinney and Allen ISD, if you will, and again, this has not been confirmed. So if it's not accurate, don't get mad, but it's just something that is interesting. Apparently, their PPO is about $2,800 a month. Now, I'm not sure if that's for a family or for a singular person. It looks as though it would be for a family with a child. And if that's the case, and the school district pays about $300, that leaves the teacher out of pocket $2,500 a month. That's like $30,000. So if you're getting paid $50,000 to work in the school district and you're having to pay for your insurance and that's $30,000, that really means you're netting, what, $20,000? Now, again, I haven't checked the information on this. This could be misconstrued, misunderstood, and I'm not going to disparage the person that sent this to me, but I got to tell you, say it's 80% true. Say it's 50% true. Say it costs $15,000 out of pocket to carry insurance for your family for the year. That's a lot of money. And if you're getting paid $50,000 a year and you're having to give up roughly 30% of your paycheck to have insurance, I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's accurate. And I want to be clear. I'm basing this off of an email that is, I guess, fairly detailed, but I don't want to give a lot of details because, again, I'm not standing by the veracity of this. I'm looking at it merely as a thought-provoking piece here, right? So let me ask you, those of you out in the world like me that have a real job, i.e. not a government job, right? Those of us that pay for everything. I mean, we're coughing up in the neighborhood of 20% of what we make to taxes. And then we cough up about another 10% of what we spend to taxes. So our net cost is 30%. Well, it's actually much higher when you factor everything else. But just ballparking, 30% of whatever we make goes to taxes. Now, factor in that you had to pay 30% more for insurance. So you're living off of 40% of whatever your paycheck is. So hypothetically, somebody that's making $100,000 a year, after their take home and their insurance, they're netting out $40,000. That's rough. Now, seems to me our founding fathers tossed the British for less than that. Of course, they didn't have that awesome insurance. A lot of them just died on the side of the road. So there is that. But let me ask you, how awesome is that insurance if it's bankrupting you? Right? So if you're a teacher or a city employee or a county employee and you're having to pony up 25 or 30% of your paycheck just to buy insurance on top of the taxes that you still have to pay, even with a government job, you're still going to pay, let's say 15 to 20% of your income to that. So you're living off of half of what you make. Again, I don't know what the veracity is. And I got to be honest, I have a job where I don't have to carry the insurance. And my wife has the job that carries the insurance. And that's, for better or for worse, that's the way it is. But when you're in certain networks and certain groups, the insurance is significantly less, but it's still not cheap. And I can't think of any example where insurance has ever got less expensive. And I don't know if it's specifically because they're covering more or because they're paying out more. So while we're on the topic, let's follow this to its natural conclusion, if you will. So there's this thing called excess deaths. Now, I know this is a real touchy subject, and if I had something that I was making money off, this would cause me to be demonetized, and certainly probably going to kick the algorithm into overdrive. But this thing called excess deaths. So if you have a given population, and you expect a certain percentage of that population to die over the course of a year, let's just say it's 2%. Don't know what it is, but just hypothetically. And that excess death number goes up to 3%. So that's a 50% increase. Now, granted, when you're going from 2 to 3, 50% increase sounds worse than what it actually is. But what if it was 12% and it went up to 18%? Now that's something more substantial, right? That means close to 1 in 5 people are dying early. So most of those people have some form of insurance. Whether it's auto insurance, say maybe they died and crashed. Maybe they just have health insurance and they have a lot of large bills before they pass on. Or maybe they have a insurance of death or accidental death. That's costing those insurance companies a whole lot more money. They're paying out more. Well, the natural thing is, we're just going to charge more, right? If we're paying out more, we're going to have to take in more because that's the only way we can stay net profit. And I mean, insurance companies do not work for free. In fact, their sole existence is based off of making money, just like every other corporation. And honestly, nobody goes into business to not make money. So I'm not going to hold that against them exactly. So what does that mean? That means we got issues that are being covered up by the fact that they're just charging us more. Now, what does that mean for you and I? That's a darn good question. Where do we go from that? Right? I mean, we're going to call it, over the last 4 years, we've had north of 25% increase in everything. I've heard people talk about their Walmart bill quadrupling. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will just tell you flat out, pretty much everything you buy is more expensive now than what it was 4 years ago. And whether you want to blame Trump or blame Biden, I don't care. I would say you need to blame them both. But while you're blaming the both of them, you need to blame the entirety of the Congress, the entirety of the Federal Reserve System, and quite frankly, pretty much anybody else in power. They put us in this situation. They created the situation that we can't quite get out of, right? They're the source of the failures. Now, whether you want to say they created too much money out of thin air, okay. Whether they shut down the economy, okay. Whether they handicap people, okay. Whether or not they injured people with something they were forced to take in order to continue working, okay. Whether you want to say it was all planned, okay. It really doesn't matter how, the what, and the why. It's just what is. And what is, things are a whole lot more expensive. I don't see an easy way to reverse that. I don't see an easy way to change that. But in the backdrop of all the crazy that's going on, Scotus shows up. Now, Scotus is far from perfect. And I got to be honest, Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, not huge fans, not that I ever was in the first place, but are they better than Elena Kagan and Kenji Brown? Well, yeah, but Sotomayor. Yeah, but I mean, if that's our yardstick, if that's the bar we're measuring them against, I mean, come on, that's nothing. So Scotus kicked out the Chevron rule or deference. For those of you that don't know what that means, you need to go look it up. Basically, it's what created administrative law. It's what allows for the bureaucracy to ruin your lives. And the SCOTUS said, yeah, that wasn't such a great idea. We're going to go ahead and reverse that. We're going to do away with that. Now, a lot of federal agencies are losing their minds over this, to which I say, yeah, too bad, so sad. You guys have usurped power that was never yours. You've abused the Constitution. You've abused the people. Quite frankly, the fact that you're not hanging from yardarms speaks to the restraint of the American public. So I'm not really feeling bad for them. And then they recognize something that should have been self-evident from the beginning, that the president, while they're the president, has certain immunities to certain things they do while they're the president. Now, it seems like something that you would just say, well, duh, but apparently it was really a contentious thing. Now, look, there are certain things that can't and shouldn't be done, no matter when and why you're president. But as a general rule, whoever the president is, they have to be able to do certain things that maybe are not exciting, not good things, because they're the president. They have to make those calls. And while we're on the topic, absolutely nothing on the 6th day of January of 2021 even rises to the level of some of the things that were authorized by Harry Truman, Franklin Roosevelt, Lyndon Baines Johnson, right? Or even Reagan, for that matter. None of those things come anywhere near the level of that. So I'm not excited about the idea that George Bush can't be prosecuted as a war criminal. But on the flip side, as the leader of these United States, he did what he thought he needed to do, mostly on the prompting of the intelligence agencies that directed his presidency. Well, and if you think that's an odd way of phrasing it, then you haven't been paying attention. What does that mean for you and I? It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, right? There's been a couple other decisions that came down that are equally interesting, and quite frankly, I'm curious to see how those will play out. But for now, we're just gonna mention those two, and you need to do your own research and tell me what you think, or actually figure out for yourself what you think, rather than me tell you. But as I would say, the entire purpose of this is my opinion. I don't claim to be a genius. I don't say I know everything. But if I think I know something, I will speak on it. If I have a general idea of something, I'll wait out and give an opinion. I encourage people to do their own research always. Neil Bortz used to say, just because I tell you something doesn't mean you should believe it. You should never believe anything that somebody tells you without first checking it and double checking it yourself. You need to know what's real and what's not. You need to back this up. The problem is, in the world we live in today, there's fact checkers that basically invert reality because they can. So I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what to tell you there. So, we touched on what Scotus did. I would call both of them are legitimately positive outcomes. I'm sure there's somebody who might want to argue those things, but I'm not exactly enthusiastic about any former president being railroaded after they're not the president anymore. Now, there are people that did bad things, and essentially Scotus said, well, if they're impeached and convicted, then yes, you can go after them. Well, yeah, that because Congress actually did its job then. They threw the bum out. They punished them. And now the courts can step in and deal with it if there was something truly legitimately bad there. So that's what your takeaway should be on that. Okay, so I think we've covered that. Now, just for the purposes of this, they talked about the 25th Amendment, essentially removing the sitting president. I'm certain that some of my listeners are at least familiar with the concept that the ship's doctor is the only one that can basically tell the captain, you're not going to be the captain any longer. You're stepping down. So the captain can relieve anybody of duty, including the XO. But the only one that can relieve the captain of his duty is the doctor. Now, you may have seen this maybe play out on some of the old Star Trek shows. Certainly, you've seen something like this in some of the old war movies, I'm sure. But this is an instance where we have a president that was elected to serve for a 4-year term, but maybe 2 or 3 years in, they become mentally incapacitated or they become physically incapacitated. They really shouldn't be doing the job anymore. This is where you should think about Woodrow Wilson. But nevertheless, our current president is clearly not up to the job, but there's a certain percentage of Democrats that just don't care. And I don't know if it's they just don't care because the guy's a Democrat and we'll take any Democrat we can get, or if it's they just hate Trump that much that they would take the worst possible person and keep them as the president. And I've always been honest, I'm not the huge fan of the Donald. I don't even know that I can define MAGA in a term that I would agree to with somebody else, right? Making America great again is a really good tagline, but what does that mean and how do you do it? There's a lot of questions in that, but as far as the general concept, the theory, sure, it sounds wonderful. Let's do it. What does that entail? I don't know. Does anybody really know? I mean, if it means lowering regulations, yeah, I'm in. If it means criminal justice reform, yeah, I'm in. If it means shutting down the darn border, yeah, I'm in. If it means figuring out who actually belongs in these United States and encourage them to get jobs and do something with their lives, yeah, I'm in. If it means, I don't know, keeping the military from tail spinning into oblivion, yeah, I'm in. If it means reasserting some dominance in the world, defining dominance might be a little questionable. How about we're going to trade with all and battle with none? We're friends with everybody. We'll trade with you, but we're not going to stick our nose in your business because what you're doing in your country really isn't our business. Or even if we just reverted to the Monroe Doctrine, I mean, that would be maybe in line with what somebody might understand as making America great again. But I'm not certain we can even do that anymore. See, we've poked the bear, we've poked the dragon, and we have the guy in Rome, D.C., fiddling while it burns, right? What does this mean to us? What are we going to do about it? When the president is not the president, what do you do? And it's not like we can just toss him because his own cabinet's not going to replace him. Because to replace him would be to admit that they knew all along the guy was unfit. And God help us if they replace the unfit imposter with the joke that is the VP. Talk about somebody that has absolutely no business doing anything at that level. And good. You know what? You can hate the Donald. You can say he has the mores of an alley cat. You can say he was a terrible guy that divorced his wife 3 times. That can all be true. But he didn't marry his babysitter, nor did he take showers with his young daughter. Just saying. To the best of my knowledge, none of his kids are crackheads. Just saying. So if you're going to point out the shortcomings of the Donald, then it's only fair to point out the manifest shortcomings of Resident Biden. You know, the 10% for the big guy. What good has come out of this, I can't say. But what I can tell you is, not a heck of a lot. The question that Reagan asks is, are you better off now than what you were 4 years ago? Seems very appropriate in today's day and age. Now, whether, again, you want to blame Donald for getting bushwhacked, lied, manipulated to by the people that were working for him and agreeing to all these massive shutdowns and the slowdown of the American economy under the premise of the pandemic, okay, fine. And I think that's a fair critique. If you want to say that, you know, he's kind of a blowhard and he's not really stuck on any principles, okay, fair enough. Fine. I'll allow you that critique as well. And that can all be true. But the other option's even worse. And I hate that that's where we're at right now, because it seems like it's the same thing every time. Well, you get to pick the lesser of the two evils, Stephen. What are you going to do? How about instead of shooting myself in the head immediately, I'll just allow the chance for they might stab me in the back later. Or I know, better yet, let's import a few 100,000 Muslims into a city and see if that makes it better. Folks, if you pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the world, England is basically committed suicide. Australia is in terrible shape. France is celebrating that they elected a left-of-center moderate as a great bulwark against the Islamic invasion. We'll see. Meanwhile, you got the Czechs, the Hungarians, and the Austrians going, yeah, this is not such a great idea to be importing hundreds of thousands of Islamic people that actually hate us, don't share our mores, don't share our culture or our values. Yeah, that was really a bad idea, Germany. Why the heck did you go along with this, France? But that's the world Europe is. Now, granted, there's 600 million Europeans. They could probably hold their own if they, I don't know, find their man card. When I think about these United States, and I think about what's happened to us and the assault that we've been under, I kind of think to myself, well, it's not that bad. It's really not. I mean, granted, Canada to the north of us is a socialist hellhole at this point. They're barely even a functioning country from what I can see and what I hear. But hey, it sounds good. We're just Europe light. But here in these United States, we have to figure out what we're going to do. We have to put it to work. What do I mean by that? There's a lot of people that fret. They fret over things that desperate people are advocating to fix the problem because they would or should articulate desperate times call for desperate measures. And I would agree. I don't know that the times can get that much more desperate than where we currently are at. I'm fairly certain that the Article 5 convention, if and when it should ever happen, and I think it's highly unlikely, but if and when it should ever happen, would be a mess. My biggest concern is, would they just deem it passed and we got stuck with it? And you could say what you want about it not going off the rails, but again, desperate times lead to desperate measures. And I could very easily see a whole lot of people signing on to this and doing it in a rush to, quote, fix things and not dotting the I's and not crossing the T's. And we end up with a giant mess. Now, to be fair, the same people that are fretting over the Article 5 convention, which will probably not happen in my lifetime, and quite frankly, even if it did happen, there's no guarantee it would be the worst case scenario, nor is there any guarantee that it would be a good outcome. These same folks, a lot of them at least, are fretting over any kind of national divorce, whether it's Texit or Calexit or whatever. They think the breakup of these United States is the end of the world. Well, I will tell you, it's happened before. It's historically the way things happen. When an empire fails, it breaks apart into its components. Right? When you looked at the Soviet Union and it fell apart, it gave up the Baltic states. It gave up Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, all the stands, right? And it made Russia stronger long term. There was a whole lot of crazy that went on in between, and it freed Poland to become Poland. And it put East Germany back to regular Germany. There's still a mess there, but be that as it may, right? It allowed the Czechoslovakia to break apart and become, well, we'll call it somewhat independent, the country of Slovakia and the Czech Republic, right? These were all things that were net positive for Europe and, quite frankly, for Russia, long term. Now, again, I'm not talking about their leader, Putin. Nobody's going to celebrate Putin. But again, I will go back to my previous statement that I've said 100 times, if once. Putin loves his country, which is more than I can say for our current resident. That being said, before that, go back in time, when the, British Empire, the French Empire, the German Reich before the Third Reich fell, there were a whole lot of colonies and protectorates that broke free and went independent. Now, whether or not it was actually better for those independent nations long term, maybe the jury's still out on a lot of that. I think India would say they're far better off. I think there's several countries within the Middle East that would say they're far better off. I'm not certain about all the African countries or some of the ones in Southeast Asia, if they're legitimately better off or not. But I will tell you, most of those people would rather be ruled by their own people and have less nice things than to be ruled by foreigners and have maybe a few nicer things. I guess that's just culture, human nature, the odds of how people feel. I don't know, but it is interesting, isn't it? In order for the states to work, they have to actually be states. They have to be groups of people that are homogenous to a degree, that they have the same values, the same culture, the same background, speak the same language, right? Is that too much to ask for? So when these United States should break up, like Rome, like the Mongol Empire, like the Chinese Empire, and any one of these empires, when they broke apart into their constituent pieces, those constituent pieces came along and they survived. They did okay. I am utterly confident that the 5 or 6 or 10 pieces of these United States would probably band back together in some way, somehow. And if for no other reason to fend off foreign invasion, right? But is there really any good reason for California to stay bound to these United States? And while we're at it, why would California need to stay bound together, right? There's at least 2 or 3 separate entities that would survive on their own apart from California proper. When you look at Washington and Oregon, I mean, they're essentially 2 states that were slammed together. They're separated by the Cascades, if you will. I mean, Alaska could very easily go on its own. Now, they don't have a way to defend themselves, but really and truly, other than a few islands, who's going to go to the time and trouble to go and invade Alaska? I mean, even when we took it over, we didn't invade it. And what are they going to do? Come through Canada? I mean, the Navy, such as it is, still rules the seas. I mean, let's face it. I think the entirety of the country would be better if we lopped off Yankee land. I mean, granted, we lose out on Maine and New Hampshire, but they're still hanging in there. Maybe they go independent on their own. I don't know. Maybe they just lop off that little section that's on the sea where all the leftists live, and Maine and New Hampshire go their own way. Could happen. Why not? I mean, I'm not exactly what you would call somebody that's pro-Confederacy, but there's a reason why the Confederacy kind of formed. Those people had a much closer way of looking at life than the Yankees did. Some of the stuff was particularly odious that they liked or they wanted to protect, but you can't judge somebody, from 200 years in the past by today's standards. I mean, if that's the case, and if they were to judge us, could you imagine that? Well, yes, we believe you can own other people, but that crazy stuff you're doing with men pretending to be girls, and you're okay with that, and you can go to a gun shop that has a name of a fish in it, and they're perfectly okay with men going in the ladies' restroom? Yeah, we don't want any part of that future. Your girls want to pretend to be boys by lopping off body parts, and you're okay with that? Yeah, we don't want any part of that culture. I mean, it goes both ways, folks. Let's keep in mind the world we live in. So the idea that the state could work. The state is an outgrowth of a nation. The nation is a group of people that are similar. It's not that hard. And what does that mean? That means as the time ticks forward for all of us, we have to really consider the long-term outcome of what's going on. I grieve for our country, our republic, these United States, because I don't know how much longer we're going to continue to survive in our current state. And I'm not sure that we want to survive in our current state. There's a lot of problems here. There's issues that probably are fundamentally flawed and can never, ever be fixed. But that's the world we live in. And if we at least make peace with that idea, if we acknowledge that there's problems, we could maybe fix them, but we can't even acknowledge what the problems are. We can't agree on those. I mean, we literally went through a whole month where we were told to celebrate perversion. And quite frankly, most of the churches were silent. Most of the people were silent. They're just knuckled under and go along to get along. Just please leave us alone. Don't torment us anymore. Really? I'm sorry. I mean, I don't hate any group of people for who they are or what they are. I do roll my eyes at some of the nonsense, and I am a little concerned about certain groups of people that come here en masse and want to change the world, meaning us, to their way of thinking, especially when their way of thinking is something that I'm diametrically opposed to. But really? I'm not sure how we got to the world where 2 to 5% of the population dictate terms to the other 95 to 98%. And we pretend that this perversion, this mental illness is not only good and sane, that we're wrong for even doubting it. And, people from 200 years ago, well, they were the problem. I mean, again, every time I hear the word clown world, or the words clown world, or trash world, or upside down world, I can't help but think how accurate a description that is. They profess themselves to be wise, but demonstrated their foolishness. Yes, I know that's a paraphrase. I don't know what to tell you. We literally have an entire nation that celebrates up being down and down being up. That the FBI, the police apparatus of our nation, is more concerned about right-of-center people that are activists than the people that were literally burning down cities. They're more concerned about people that went to school board meetings than people that are flooding across the border. They're more concerned about Christians praying to end whatever latest wackadoo stuff is coming down from these mentally ill people than the Muslim hordes that seek to impose Sharia law. Now, I'm just fine if you live in Afghanistan and you want to have Sharia law and you're 90-some% Islamic and that's what you love. Go for it. I'm not going to go. Oh, wait, we already did that. Yeah, that didn't turn out too well for us either, did it? Yeah, the Greeks, the Persians, the Russians, the British, and us. Who could have ever seen that coming? Well, that's right. I did. You did. Most of us did. Look, I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying everybody else is evil. But what I am saying is, let's not run ourselves into the ground. Let's not pretend we're the worst thing ever. I mean, I know when I go look in the mirror, the world sees evil, white Anglo-Saxon dude who's a Christian and likes women. Oh, actually, loves one woman and has pledged his life for her. So I am now the epitome of all that is wrong and what is evil in this world. Nevertheless, I know that's not true. The question is, do you know that? And not only that, do you know it? Do you act on it? Do you behave like that's bogus? Do you understand what the world needs today is more men like me, like you, that are willing to take a stand and mean something? Get down on a knee and pray for guidance and protect your wife and your family and do the right thing politically and stand for, Texas first, America as well. That's what we need more of, and the good women to come with us and raise our kids to think the same way. That's what we need more of. But we shall see if it's enough. We shall see if it makes the difference. Now, unfortunately, we may never know. I may never see the sunset on these United States. I may never see the fruit of the seeds I plant. But we shall see. We shall see. With that, this has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.